ideas for stories and stuff.
Great.
I'm having trouble getting a team together and having other people work on it with me, and then eventually I'm trying to sell the idea.
Right.
If I can have other people do it.
Right.
As an insider, how do the ideas that you've worked with take flight?
Okay, so a lot of the shows that I worked on were created in Japan originally, right?
Yep.
Right? So there's the adaptation side of the shows that I worked on. Then a lot of the shows that I worked on are also what are called prelay shows, where we record the dialogue first. I directed Viva Pinata, the funny little show. I played a couple characters on that show as well. And that was done like you'd watch do a Pixar movie, like a Disney film, where we do the voices first, or like the Japanese did with Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon, they did the voices first. And then they animate afterwards. I will say this, that the technology today is so much more advanced than when I first started in this business, that nowadays, if you have a really powerful computer and a couple of talented people, you can pretty much make a cartoon. From the animation programs that are out there, to the audio programs that are out there, they're no longer like thousands and thousands of dollars, just to get a license for these things. So the technology is there. But in terms of putting your team together, are you a student here?
No.
Okay, all right. But this is a school, so I'm sure that there are a lot of talented people here that work in many of the jobs that would be required for creating a show.
I'm starting upstate this fall for computer information science. So I'm
Okay.
trying to dabble my hands in creation software, like the one you spoke about.
Yeah, right.
And I know Studio Ghibli just released their.
I saw that, and that's free. They just made it free, which is great because here's the thing, and I'm a fan also of I'm a geek as well. I'm a gamer geek. That's my thing. All right. So I love that stuff, and I know you guys love anime. But the thing is, you can also say, well, I follow that show. I love that show. The cool thing is, all right, I get what's working, why these stories work. Let me do something on my own. And I love the fact that, I'm a singer-songwriter. I grew up listening to rock and roll, and I thought, I love this stuff, but you know what? I can do that. Let me go get a guitar. Let me write some songs. I can do that. So now with this, you can do this. I will say this. If you do find the talented people who want to work and want to put the time in, hold on to them. I've had the same creative group of people that I've worked with in music for almost 20 years.
Right.
Because I don't let them go. Because when you find them, you don't want to let them go. Because creativity doesn't always come with being organized, as you probably realized in your life. Okay? When you find the ones that are creative and organized, you hold on to them. Now, a great team leader can be the glue. So if you found a writer, an artist, an audio person, a video person, and they all do what they do really well, but they can't seem to get the team to do anything, you need a good team leader. Now, a good team leader also has great lieutenants that also are expert in their fields. So in getting your own idea across, I will say this. I know for a fact that there are companies that scan YouTube. They scan them. They look for things that are posted that are getting tremendous amount of activity. Web series, things like that. So why wouldn't you, first of all, make sure you own it, make sure you have registered all of that stuff. Why wouldn't you put together a great little team and start releasing maybe a weekly short webisode and see what kind of feedback we get? All of the cartoons I worked on were commercials for products. Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, all of those shows that we worked on. When's the last time you watched the show? Right. When's the last time you played the video game?
3 years ago.
No,
Which one?
The video game is most people go like yesterday, right?
Which one?
Right. Because once the show grabs you as a fan, it's the properties that they make the money on. No one's making money on, except for advertising revenue for the show. They're making money on the video games you buy, the cards you buy, all of those things. So when you are coming up with your own show, you also have to think about merchandising, especially if you're talking about cartoons. If you're doing your own show, like just a sitcom, well, if it's like your Modern Family, you're not going to find the Modern Family dad action figure. You might find it on a lunchbox. But with shows like cartoons, all of those characters can be in games, they can be on cards, they can be toys. That's what it is. So when you're thinking about your own show, you also think about the merchandising side. Yeah.
One of the problems I'm having with this is I can't form a team for whatever reason. I'm working a lot of this stuff on myself, but I also feel like I have the ideas, just go write them down, and fighting that as a block.
Right.
I'm trying to add to it, trying to make it better, I write it down.
Right.
Have you ever created anything that you wanted to write down but you just couldn't make yourself do because you're not ready for it, I guess? You're not inspired?
No, well, I mean, I'm a songwriter. I write songs all the time. I sometimes dictate it into my phone when I'm like just walking down the street. I hit I can get the idea off the top of my head, or I have pieces of paper in the hotel room. Like today, I was writing things down on where can I find a pen. But the other thing is, you don't have to be doing every piece of it. If you've got a rough concept, you find a writer. If you've got you can't draw, but you've got a character description, you find an artist. So that's really what that's about. That's really what you don't have to be an expert in every. I don't play lead guitar, I have a lead guitarist. I don't play drums, I have a drummer. I know what kind of feel I want, but I'm not going to sit down and play drums. So you don't have to be an expert. But as I said, the best thing about putting together the team is putting together a bunch of people who do what they do really well, and you can steer them as a team, and give them incentive. You have to give them incentive. If people are working on your project and they're not getting paid, then they need to own a piece of it. You need to share. People should not have to work for free, right?
I have a question about what you were touching up on, the cartoons, if you don't have the cartoon, you don't really get that much, but for video games and the merchandising stuff.
Right.
My question really is for example, most recently, for a lot of newer games, they don't dub the anime for the video games anymore.
Right.
Is there what is because for example, Attack on Titans, I don't know when they're coming out with the new game, but I haven't heard anything about it possibly being dubbed, and it's just as big as Dragon Ball Z was back in the day, but yet no one's thinking about dubbing the video game. So I'm just wondering
now you're talking about no one's dubbing games, meaning the full motion thing,
the video games,
in the game itself.
If it's if the game is if the franchise is popular, right? Yeah. Wouldn't it make sense for them to continue dubbing the game? Because I don't see really games besides Dragon Ball Z and Naruto. I don't see games like that getting dubbed anymore.
Right. Well, there are obviously someone had to buy the merchandising license. Right?
Yeah.
So if nobody's interested in the license, then there's no reason to make it. Viva Pinata was a very successful first video game, so we made a show. The second game tanked. They pulled the show. Stopped making the show.
No.
Because there's no merchandise anymore. No one wants to sell toys that are associated with it. So if you're asking why is there no Attack on Titan video game yet? Is that what you're asking?
Like that. I heard.
How many seasons did that have?
It has so far one season that's been dubbed.
Is it going to start again?
They have a second season coming up soon.
And they have a date when it's going to start.
But there's no announced date. But they announced that a game's coming out, but it hasn't been announced whether it's going to be dubbed or not.
And what channel is that on?
Toonami, Adult Swim.
Yeah, Adult Swim cable.
Yeah.
Big difference between network television and cable television.
Okay.
Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh are shows that were on network television Saturday morning.
Local.
Right?
Locally, Kids WB.
Well, yeah, Kids WB, but Saturday morning.
Yeah.
Network television.
Okay.
You mean the big three networks?
What?
The big three networks?
No, just network television. I mean,
yeah,
has
because they don't do that anymore. They don't have the kids block anymore, on Saturday mornings anymore either.
So there's a difference between a show that either goes straight to DVD or goes to cable and becomes like a cult following, but there's not a international distribution of it.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So when a show is popular, then the toy companies come along and the video game companies come along and say, I'd like to buy the licensing to show X and make a video game for it. If there's not a huge amount of advertising, which is the show is on in every country all around the world,
they're not going to dub it?
Then it doesn't make money for them.
Okay.
It doesn't make money. I don't know the deal with that particular show, but I can tell you that at the height of Pokemon, at the height of
because that's what I'm thinking. Because if the show's popular,
shows that were dubbed internationally.
Okay.
You could go to France and find Pokemon. You can go to Germany and find Pokemon, right? Which for kids own the rights to. They licensed it to other countries. So that's why every video game, every car company, every toy company wanted to get a deal. Every fast food chain wanted to get a deal. If there's only a limited audience that knows that show, it makes no sense to spend that kind of money to program a game. Now, maybe it comes out after season 2. I don't know. That would be their deal. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Good question. So Brock, what's funny about playing Brock is I love the fact that in that particular show and in that character, he's a good friend. He takes things very seriously when he has to, but he's easily distracted by things that are shiny.
Nurse Joy.
Hero, right?
Nurse Joy.
So I didn't realize how many times he had tried to pick up a girl until a fan put together what they call Brock's best horn dog moments as a YouTube video. It's an 8-minute video. I think you can find it easily. And they put them back to back to back to back to back to back. And when you see them all like that for 8 minutes, I mean, 8 minutes, that's a long time. So there's probably like 50 cuts of him saying something. That was pretty impressive. And you start to think like, wow, doesn't he have anything else to do? Yeah, that was just fun to do. I thought of him as, he's 15 in high school, and he obviously doesn't know if he ever got a date what to do besides maybe cook for them, which would be very romantic to me. But I have not used any of Brock's lines. I must say that. Yeah, not at all. Yes.
Well, given the fact that Brock, from hearing this and from going back in my memory, seems to be like a one personality character, like, didn't over time Brock just like fell flat on you, like you didn't enjoy playing him anymore?
I always enjoy playing every character I've played.
Even, but I'm just saying that it just sounds like the characterization of Brock like seems to be somewhat flat because of that persistent running gag.
No, that's just when you take a bit of his personality and cut it all together into 8 minutes, it becomes consistent, right? But when you look at 20 minutes worth of a show, and he might flirt with a girl 3 times throughout the 20 minutes, that's not one-dimensional. Plus, Brock was not one-dimensional. Brock was a good friend. He was someone that they could depend on. He took that group very seriously as family. This was his distraction, where everybody had a distraction. When Ash wanted to get another badge in every town he came to, that was his distraction, right?
He's still doing it.
Part of his personality. I don't think he was one-dimensional at all.
It's just that my memory was a bit foggy. I apologize.
When you're working on like the decision of creating a character, how do you go through what that character will sound?
Good question. So there we go. There's a voiceover question. So certain jobs, if they're a dub, some clients want you to imitate what you're hearing in the original. Now, I do not speak Japanese, but if I hear the register and cadence of the Japanese dialogue, I can imitate it with an English-speaking voice. So, but the other thing is, sometimes what they've picked doesn't necessarily work with the region where we're going to air it. Comedy is regional. What is funny in one country is not necessarily funny in another country. For instance, I use this as an example. Let's say in the original Japanese show, the biggest, gigantic character is named Tiny, okay? And he's got a big, deep voice, and he talks like this. That's funny, right? Because he's a big guy. But in America, Tiny should talk like this with a really high voice because he's the biggest guy in the show. There's some laughter. Because it's regional. What makes us laugh here might not make people laugh there. Vice versa. So sometimes when we're working on a show, we copy what they've done, and if we're doing a dub. And sometimes we go against that for what will work for us. Another thing that is a change is if you listen to a lot of original anime, it sometimes sounds like the same actor is playing 5 of the main characters. The voices are not that different. It's like, oh look, here's 5 teenage boys in a show. And they all kind of sound like maybe it's 2 different actors doing all 5. Well, we like to be able to recognize the different characters even when you're not in the room watching the television. When you go into the kitchen to go get a snack, you would still know when it's Joey or when it's Kaiba or when it's Yugi because it's a different voice. We might give them different accents or different regionalisms so that you recognize those voices. So that's another thing. Certain characters, they don't know what they want. They know kind of the style of the approach, but they don't have the voice in their head. So when I go for an audition for a cartoon, normally what they do is they give you what are called sides, which are, here's a picture of the character, and here are some lines from the show, or the potential show, with different moods that this character will go through. Happy, sad, angry, just little snippets so that you have a sense of, well, how angry does he get? Or how sad does he get? Let's see what we do with this character. And then you come into the booth and you just read. You come up with a voice that you think makes sense. You're looking at the picture and you think, okay, tough guy, I'm going to do this, or funny, quirky one, I'm going to do this. But a lot of times you'll have multiple characters that you're reading for in an audition. So you might try voice A on this one, voice B on that one, voice C. When they've made their choices later on, because I've also been a casting director, I might like the voice that I did for the third character on the first character. I might say, you know what, Eric really did a cool thing on this, but that would be better for this character. So sometimes they don't know. When I came up with Meta Knight's voice, I was brought in to audition for Kirby, and they said, we want to do something that's very Clint Eastwood. Now, I was working on Yu-Gi-Oh! At the time, and I said, if I do anything that's Clint Eastwood, I'm going to sound like Kaiba. That's my Clint Eastwood approach to my vocal style. And we can't have, the same voice for Meta Knight as Kaiba. I said, what if I do Antonio Banderas? What if I play him with a Spanish accent? Oh, so he's sexy like this, right? And the producer said, why is he Spanish? I said, well, why not? They said, okay, that makes sense. right? So the cool thing about Meta Knight was he has no lip flap. He just has a helmet, which means I didn't have to match any lip flap. I could say things with dramatic pauses, no? Because there was no lip flap. So that worked for that character. Cool side story to that. I was doing a convention in Miami last year, and a group of young men came up to my table and they saw my cards that I have, and they saw the picture of Meta Knight, and they said, wait a second, you were the voice of Meta Knight? It's like, yeah. I said, well, we just want to thank you. I said, why? I said, because you're the only character on children's television that we grew up watching who sounded like us, who didn't make fun of us, who wasn't a stereotype. You were cool. And I was like, I didn't even think about that at the time. But the choice I made, yes, we poke fun at so many things that you forget that if you're only poking fun at them and never actually making them the hero, then you're offending people. And these young men all grew up with the cool voice of Meta Knight, who is the coolest on that show. Yes. But yeah, so sometimes you have to reach into what I call your bag of tricks, which are the voices you do to start with and come up with what, should I try this? Should I try that? Because some directors don't really know what they want. So there you go. Yeah. I was the reason. And this is before Puss in Boots. So I played Antonio Banderas before he played Antonio Banderas. I was imitating him, and then he imitated me imitating him. That's how it worked. Yes. Who hasn't asked me a question? Yes.
I noticed
It's a good question. So theater, acting. I have been an entertainer since probably I was 2. My mother told me I would stand up on the couch and give speeches to people that came over to the house even before I spoke English. I did some theater in school, but my thing was I was a musician, I was a singer-songwriter, so I played in front of audiences for a long time. My first band was in 8th grade, and we played bars that we weren't old enough to actually go into because we could pack them. And you know, even though our friends could only buy burgers and fries and not drink any alcohol, but the core is always acting. I learned so much from working on the other side of the glass. I was a casting director and a producer and ran a recording studio that produced radio and TV commercials for close to 10 years before I was doing certain characters that you know. I was learning by directing and absorbing as a sponge, working with some very well-known New York theater actors and TV stars that you would know that were doing voiceovers. I would direct them, they would act on these commercials. And I am a sponge when it comes to trying to learn. And so I learned how to engineer, I learned how to direct, understood how copy works, I understood how, I'm also a singer, so using my voice as the same instrument. Inflection is all pitch. Do you want to go to the store? Do you want to go to the store? Do you want to go to the store? All of those things, the stress is just changing the pitch on the word to give it the emphasis, right? But I will say that if you are interested in acting, which voice acting is a part of, then yes, going and studying acting is a big plus. But I'm probably the oddball. Voice acting and production, that has always been my job, so that I have the freedom to play all original music whenever I want. And the question I never ask is, how much am I getting paid for that gig? Because that helps me just play music to play music. It's a passion of mine. So but I also know that you need to work with someone to learn how to take direction, to learn how to find your own characters. And I just mean not even funny voices, I mean just to emote. But no, I didn't go to school for acting. And I don't do on camera. And I don't do theater, I don't do on camera, I don't do movies. The only visual you'll see is when I sing, and everything else is all audio. I do industrials, I do audiobooks, I do commercials, anything that involves the voice. Right. I was working, now here's another part of my experience advice. Being an apprentice or interning is a lost art. We are so strapped for cash as a people that when these opportunities come up, we're always like, I need a job. And people say, we're not hiring. And then you don't learn anything, and then you don't get a job. What I say is important is, okay, let's say I want to be a carpenter. I find the best carpenter in town, and I say, listen, I want to be a carpenter. I will clean your shop. I will take out the trash. I'll put your tools away if I can just watch you do what you do. Because 9 times out of 10, what happens is, not only do you learn how to do the stuff, but that carpenter probably gets overwhelmed with jobs and says, do me a favor. Could you go hang those cabinets at so-and-so's house? Great. Can you go do, you're ready for this. Can you build this table for me? Because that's how you learn, right? So the trade-off is you're volunteering your time, and in a little bit of time, you'll be making money doing it. But if you're immediately asking for this, that carpenter would say, I'm not hiring an assistant. Thank you very much. I worked at a recording studio. I made coffee. I took the trash out. I made copies of scripts. I wanted to work in a recording studio. That would be, hey, if I work in a recording studio, I can learn how to engineer and edit, and then I can make music. This will be great. I didn't even think about commercials. But I learned from the woman that ran the company and the engineer that worked there. I used to edit on reel-to-reel tape. That's how I learned. With a razor blade, rocking reels, I had tape hanging around my neck, cutting words in, hanging things on hooks in the studio. So now that I use Pro Tools, great, but I know how to edit because I know how to edit based on sound. I now have the tools that help me do it faster, but I learned by rocking reels. 2-inch tape with a razor blade, thank you very much. You know what a tape loop was back then? You guys have made tape loops on your computers. It takes about 2 seconds to grab something and just repeat it. You know what we had to do? We had to make a tape loop on a tape machine, and if we wanted it to play more than that distance, we took a broom handle across the room and ran the tape around the broom handle to stretch the length of how many minutes we wanted it to go. Okay? So, I learned by watching and then doing. And I just think that that's a very, it's a lost art. It's a lost art. And I know we don't have enough time in our schedules to do free things, but if you really want to, and what ended up happening is, how did I make the transition? I was in the studio, and they needed a young guy voice to do something for Enterprise Rent-A-Car for one of the commercials, and I stepped in and said, "Hi, it's Johnny from Enterprise Rent-A-Car. How can I help you?" That's all I needed to say, and I booked a 5 commercial campaign as the guy from Enterprise, working with a very funny woman who was doing all of the comedy in the spot. I was a straight man in the spot, and it was great. And as I did more and more of those things, I had some opportunities to travel as a musician, and I realized that I couldn't have a 9-to-5 job doing it. So after years of directing and doing some of the voices, I got myself an agent, and then went on the road as a rock guy and did voiceovers when I was in town. So that was like, I now have a foundation to make money, but I don't have to be here every day of the week. Yeah.
I'll just ask a question that was better than the one I asked last time.
That was still a good question.
How exactly as a voice actor, like what kind of like warm-ups or what kind of exercises would you have to do to like prepare your voice?
That's a good question. So voice, like any other thing, right? You know, if you play sports, I don't know if anybody here plays sports. I've played a lot of sports. You know, back in the day, they would say you have to stretch beforehand. Of course, then you'd pull a muscle. Now they're like, no, you got to warm up a little, then you stretch and whatever. So everybody's got their own thing. Of course, I drink black coffee, which is a terrible thing for mouth noise. Caffeine dries you out and makes mouth clicks, okay? But I live on black coffee. I actually wish I had an IV that just fed it right into me at all times, okay? But I drink the black coffee not for the caffeine. I drink it for the warmth in my throat. I like it to soothe my throat. Water is great as well. Tea, all of those things to keep it hydrated, and also the warmth helps me. I have terrible allergies, and if you don't have an allergy, then just come and move to Tennessee, where I live now, and you'll have one. Because that's what we do. You come in, you get some great country music, and here's an allergy. Nice to see you. So I try not to do any voiceover work before 11 o'clock in the morning, because I wake up, I take my allergy pill, and then my head clears by about 10:30, and then I can do some voice work. Otherwise, I'm stuffed up, and my voice is like 3 octaves lower. There are all sorts of little tricks, but the main thing is when your voice starts to give, when it starts to hurt and you have a sore throat, do not mask the pain with like the chloroseptics and the things that just numb it. That's like an athlete who gets a shot and goes back out onto the field and is basically playing hurt because they don't feel it anymore. If your voice starts to go, then you need to rest it. And whispering is terrible. It puts pressure on your cords. That's also bad. Just stop talking. If you do need to do something, I use a little thing called Singer's Saving Grace, which you can get at Whole Foods or any sort of health food store. It's a natural herbal remedy that's like a little spray thing that's nasty, really nasty, for like 30 seconds, not even, maybe 10 seconds. You spray it in your mouth and you go, "Oh, Eric, I'm cursing you." And then you go, "Oh, I feel much better," because it naturally reduces swelling. So that's something that I will do. Sometimes if I have to sing a long set of music, like a 3-hour show, I might take a little spray of that just to calm down the voice. But the main thing is water and coffee for me. Other people have different things. Some people like to do actual vocal warm-ups. My sister is also a singer, and she likes to pull on her tongue and go and hum, right? Okay, whatever that is about. I don't know. We have a strange family. But everybody's got their own thing. But the warm-up that I will say is, and I sing in the car too. I'll do that on the way to the studio. I might do some singing, or singing in the shower. I gargle. But just don't blow your voice out if you're feeling any pain. Yeah.
Okay. To touch up on something you said earlier about the anime, like with the original Japanese voice actors, like how like does it like match up? Because like, for example, like I've seen some of the things that the Japanese voices have done. Like they naturally talk kind of like faster than like kind of like any of the English like type voice actors. So how do you guys try to like, you know, try to match it or try to like keep up with like the certain type of dialogues, if the dialogues are the same, if they don't change them, but like something like kind of like that, because obviously they're different and you're not going to completely match completely to their like
well, it
voice.
depends on who's directing and what show it is. If it was my show, my shows look like you actually said those words in English because I took the time to lock lip clap to the dialogue. Some shows don't do that. Some, they're like, just start at kind of the same time and end at some of the same time. I think that looks sloppy, and I think that also looks like it's a dub. I never wanted the shows that I directed to look like a dub. I always wanted to make sure that they looked like they were originally produced in English. But I will tell you this, and this goes more to the directing side. Voice acting to ADR, which is lip flap, matching lip flap, is 50% acting, 50% technical. You will watch it, and you'll see where the breaks are and how many syllables there are, and you'll look at the words you have to say, and now you have to match not only the phrasing, but the pace of it. And I've been doing this for so long, if you played me the line, the original, you beat me into where the lip flap starts, and I look at the script, I'll tell you whether it's going to fit or not. I'll also tell you, okay, I've got the pace, let me just do it.
Was there anything that, like, for example, like, for kids, like, told you that, like, they had, like, for example, like, the donuts, like, when they said donuts in Pokemon?
Well, you're talking about changing words. It's a whole different story. So here's what that's about. So, and this is more of what the panel I talk about tomorrow, but I'll just touch on this a little bit. Every show that we get in another language goes through a couple of different steps. The first step is transliteration. Have you heard that before? You know what transliteration is?
No.
So that's taking the literal Japanese, or whatever language you're working in, and writing out what the literal translation is into English, which means it's not structured in sentences that we would speak, but the content is in there. So now the other thing is, every line has what's called a time code in and a time code out. That's how long you have to start that phrase and end it, okay? So on your script, you've got a column that says time code in and a column that says time code out. So we are beat into where the time code in starts, and then we're supposed to be out where the time code out ends. If a line that we want to put in doesn't fit, we can do what's called an on-off, where the character's talking, and then it cuts to an exterior shot of a car or something like that, and we keep adding dialogue, where the original it didn't do that. So the person that's doing the transliteration writes out the words. Now, if you said all those words in English, they would never fit in the allotted time we are given for the line. Or sometimes they're too short. The content is too short for the amount of time, because in Japanese it was a longer sentence. So then that goes to an English writer who takes that content of the transliteration, looks at the lip flap, and says, how do I get what this means to fit into 5 syllables of break, 2 syllables of break, and 4 syllables? So that person's job is to sit there, count syllables, and try to get this transliterated script to fit into English-speaking dialogue.
And I just want to touch up on something about the Pokemon. Brock, who do you think, in your personal
Let me finish answering your question.
I'm sorry. I thought you were done. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't. Sorry.
Let me finish answering that question. So then you're asking the question about why do you change words? Because that's regional. If you're talking about sushi, what country do you think you're probably from, if that's all they're eating?
Sushi.
If you're talking about donuts and jelly donuts, where are you talking about?
America.
Everywhere. Everywhere. It was a change so that it was not specifically a Japanese show. Because when we then sold the show to France and sold the show to Germany, they said something else. They did not say rice balls. They did not say jelly donuts. They probably said croissants, or they said, whatever they're going to, the food that it kind of looked like, even though it didn't really look like, it's all regional. So that's why those things are changed. But not because they needed to fix the amount of syllables, but because that's a regional change.
Regional.
Right.
Just touch up.
when voicing a character, what is the biggest issue you might have overcome? And if you have encountered an issue, how did you overcome it?
There's really not like an issue. There's definitely things that you got to think about when you are approaching a complicated character. Like, let's look at Seto Kaiba, okay?
Oh.
There are some that consider him a villain. There are some that consider him
Anti-hero.
just a rival. And there's some that want to be him. And there's some that can't stand him.
Anti-hero?
When that character came along and you have the dimensions that this character has, you have to play it in a way that you're not hated because you're evil. So, those of you who are familiar with Yu-Gi-Oh!, and if you've watched the whole first story arc, you realize that later on, we find out that in the Egyptian story arc, Kaiba is the pharaoh's right-hand man, his lieutenant, his sparring partner. Why? Like Rocky and Apollo Creed, you cannot be the champ if there's not someone that pushes you to be the champ. So Kaiba's role was to keep Yugi at the top of his game, right? How do you do that in modern day? These kids are in school together. There's no such thing as a sparring partner. There's no such thing as a lieutenant. So he's a rival. If he's a rival, he pushes Yugi to be the best that he can be. So knowing the dynamic of what their ancient relationship was, and taking that into modern day, playing that character with his sarcasm and all of the stuff that he had, without crossing the line of just being hands down a jerk and evil, because there were still redeeming qualities about him. The way he felt about his family, his brother. When the chips were down, he also teamed up with Yugi when they had a common enemy. But his goal was always to push him. Always to push him. And even as far as Yugi responded to him, Yugi didn't respond to him as if this was a nemesis. He always just tried to calm him down and get him to stop pushing him so hard. And come on, we don't have to fight like this. But it was never, I hate you. So finding the way to play a character like that, when also the animation is set, right? I can't change that part. So as a voice actor, I have to look at what the picture is doing, where the line fits, and still acting. Sometimes against what you're seeing. Kaiba might have an angry face, but what I'm saying is more frustrated than it is bitter. And so that's a challenge. That role was tough. I was exhausted after some sessions with that because he required a lot more emotional range than the comedy of like a James, which was fun.
James.
And a lot easier to sort of find because when you play a funny bad guy, and he's a bad guy with quotes, when you play someone who's funny, who makes guest appearances in an episode and then disappears, right? The pressure is, I'm only here for a second, I better be funny. And then I'm going to disappear, I sometimes didn't even know what was going on in the rest of the show. Now, I directed some of Pokemon as well. I directed some of the other actors and myself in the later years. But in the beginning, I didn't do that. But I also would say, all right, so I've got James lines. We're going to jump to all the James lines. You get the global idea of what's going on in the episode, but it really didn't matter. Because all that really mattered was, what am I saying and how funny can I make it? And sometimes people are like, oh, don't you remember that episode where Brock was doing this and Ash was doing that? And then I was like, I didn't really relate to that because they weren't in scenes with me when I was doing the James stuff. So that made it easy to just be funny. But Kaiba required a lot more dynamic. So good question. Every time. We redid the Team Rocket theme every episode. Why? Because the animation was never the same. The lip flap was never the same. Sometimes the timing of the lines were different. Sometimes they hid things behind their back and it had to be faster because there was no lip flap for it. You would think that they would use the same animation every time, but they didn't. So yes, recorded all the time from scratch. Though the only thing that I added in the show that was never written in the show was when Brock was grabbed by the ear by Misty every time when he saw either a Nurse Joy or an Officer Jenny. I would always say, not the ear! And not the ear became my addition, my personal addition to the show. Sometimes, if you go back to watch the original series, I had to add it in every time she grabbed my ear, even when there wasn't room. Let's say that scene ended and immediately went to another scene in a different part of town. I wasn't even in that next shot, right? Sometimes I would just yell, "Not the ear!" and they'd put me in echo from as if I was yelling it from the other side of the island. Because it had to fit. We had to put that in there, so that's a little Easter egg. All right, who hasn't asked me a question? Let's have a new question. Who wants to ask me a question? Nobody wants to ask me a question.
With voice acting, whenever you get a role, voice actor, like how you get up to speed with everything that's happening, like in a show.
Well, when you're working on a network show, that has to be, we did 2 episodes a week. 2 episodes of Pokemon a week, 2 episodes of Yu-Gi-Oh! So a lot of dubbing, right? As a director, I usually got my script day of when I was starting. I would know who was in it and how many lines they had, but I never got a chance to read it ahead of time because of the time crunch. As an actor, I never got it ahead of time. I would walk into the booth and I would look down and I'd look at the back page, which had the line count. It would say every character and how many lines I had, and I'd go, "Oh, big Brock episode, I see. Oh, James doesn't have a lot. Oh, and there's Squirtle. Okay, cool. Okay, great. And what are we starting with? Oh, we're going to do the Brock first. Okay, and then we do Brock, and then we do James." And the director would say, "In this episode, you guys are doing this, and this is kind of what's going on here." Now, if there were some specific moments within the show, great. But most of the time, it was fly by the seat of your pants, each line. Okay, in this scene, you're doing this. Okay, there was no prep. Where if you're doing a play or doing a TV show, you hopefully have some rehearsals or seeing the script ahead of time or time to prep. Recurring character in a network cartoon like that was and go. So I had no time to prep for any of that stuff. It would have been nice to be able to prep for that stuff as a director. When I did Viva Pinata, I got the script ahead of time because that we recorded the voices first and then sent it to the animated company in Peru. They actually did the animation in Peru. I would go through my script and see the characters that were recurring that needed to come back, and then there might be a new storyline, and I had to cast new characters. So that was something that at least I had time to prep, but not the shows that had any of the ADR stuff. That was and go. Yes. Good question. How do you figure out your range for voice acting? I actually coach one-on-one up-and-coming voice actors. That's what I do, and I do it out of Nashville. And I do it. You have to audition for me first before I take you on as a student because I want to make sure you're ready to work with me because I'm tough, but I'm also at the point where when you're done with me, you're ready to go. So not like brand new. I've never done anything like this. But what I do is I say, let's find the acting before we start finding all the voices you want to do. I've had more success talking like this in my voice than any of the cartoons that you've ever heard me on. Both financially, doing commercial work, speaking like this has earned me more money than doing all the cartoons put together. Because it's the acting. Okay? So first we find the acting, we find the credibility. Voice acting, especially in commercials, and this is the secret. It's very easy. Okay, you need to be able to say stuff as if you know what you're talking about, even when you don't. Okay, I can tell you how to dismantle an engine. I don't know how to do that. You'd believe me. I tell you, how to invest financially and be successful. I definitely don't know that. But I can tell you it as a voice actor, and you believe me. Because you take this very complicated stuff and you break it down into who am I, what am I talking about, who am I talking to. I don't play Yu-Gi-Oh! I can beat all of you in a duel. I don't play Pokemon. I can also win battles and have more badges than all of you. Because I know how to compete. I know how to play games. I played sports all my life. To me, that competition in a battle, it's just me playing tennis against somebody. It's the same one-on-one thing. Teamwork. I played soccer all my life. I know what it's like to be on a team. So you use what you know. So how do we find our range? First, we find the credibility factor, the interpretation, taking direction. Then we say, okay, what can I do, coach? I'm going to try a dialect. I'm going to try an accent. I think I do a really good British accent. Oh, really? Let me hear it, student. And then you do it for me, and I go, you know what? It's not great. It's okay. And there's too many guys that do it great. Let's try something else. You do a southern accent. Yeah, which region? Which state? Do you do a good Georgia? Do you do a good Tennessee? Or are you more of a Texas thing? Oh, okay, let's find it. So if you're working with someone as a coach, they're going to try to push you in different directions to find that. Okay, it's very good to work with someone who might hear something in your voice and say, I think you might be able to do something wacky like this. And it might not even be an accent or a dialogue or a dialect. It might be something that's just over the top. Have you guys ever heard the expression rye? And I don't mean like rye with caraway seeds like in a sandwich, but like W-R-Y, right? Are you familiar with Andy Rooney, the great, at the end of 60 Minutes? Ever notice how when you go to the store, there's these things? Andy Rooney was rye. He had this very melodic arch in his voice. He did all sorts of stuff, right? That's rye. So when you hear, this is kind of weird, that's rye. I'm working with a new student right now who's like, I don't think I can do rye guy. I said, well, you don't have to do rye guy as ridiculously as what I just did, but you can definitely use a little bit of rye. You can say, Staples. Yeah, we've got that. That's rye. It's just a little bit of an arch to what you're doing. So I might be working with you and say, okay, you're very monotone. We're all Johnny One Note. I want you to play around with some of this wryness, which is using that arch, using your ear to hear where those words might need to be, the pitch might need to come up and move down. Yeah, and so that's, a coach will help you find that because you can be that outrageous with what you're doing, but then tone it down so that it's just conversational. But it's better to do less things great than to do more things that are mediocre. So do a demo reel that shows off the best you can do, even if it's 2 things, rather than adding things just to mix it up that are not as competitive as the people that can do it better than you can. Every voice actor that I know does Christopher Walken. I do not. I will tell you right now, I do not. I will not make an attempt to do Christopher Walken. There are friends of mine that should not make attempts to do Christopher Walken who say they can do it. But everyone I know says, oh, I can do Christopher Walken. I know about 5 guys that are dead on Christopher Walken. Those are the guys who should have that on their demo reel. So it's things like that. If you don't do it great, then you don't put it on your reel. But good question. Did you have a question for me, Mario?
Oh, yes. What are the must-have qualities for a voice actor?
Only one, credibility. You need to be credible. Whatever you're saying, I need to believe that they are your words. You just have to be credible. There's nothing else. Some people say, oh, I have a speech impediment. Oh, I hate the sound of my voice. It's too squeaky. You know what? There's a use for all of that in everything. Especially if you're doing animation stuff. There's some very wacky sounding people. That I have a friend that does voiceovers who has basically a lateral lisp. Like this, off the side, Tom Brokaw kind of thing, or Buddy Hackett had a lateral lisp. Buddy Hackett, famous comedian, talked like this out of his mouth. He posted a very funny thing the other day where he was asked, now he's a very successful voice actor. He does a lot of commercial stuff. He's hilarious. But he's got a lisp like that, off the side of his mouth, like this. The director said to him, that was great. We really like what you're doing. Now he booked the job. All right? This is in the session. This is not the audition. They asked him, can you do one without the lisp? As if this lisp was something that he just put on for gigs. And he said, without the lisp, I can't do it without the lisp. This is how I speak. And this is why I booked the job. So there's no oh, I've got to have a big, deep voice, or I need to be able to, project. It's credibility. So, yes, if I can't understand you, that's probably not a great thing. But selling a car, whatever it is, I need to feel as if you know what you're talking about. So start with that. So that's the core is the acting. And some people need to do method acting where they feel like they are the character at all times. Some people just look at it like I do and say, let me break it down to just the bare bones emotions of what's going on and talk about it like I'm talking about something I do know. So that it feels like I might be talking about this specific thing, but I'm really using the motivation of something else that I do understand. I do a lot of training videos for a car company where I talk to the sales force and tell them how to interact with customers and things like that. I have no idea what I'm talking about, but I know what they're trying to get across. I'm listening to what the customer is asking and how you talk to people, and so that you're not offending them. But when they start using the car lingo, I really don't know what they're talking about, but I use something else that I do understand. But that's a very good question. All right, we got 5 more minutes. Let's do a speed round. Who has not asked me a question that's been too nervous to ask me a question, but this is an anime con, and this is where you can be brave.
Over there. As a director, producer,
Yep.
how do you deal with meeting deadlines?
Meeting deadlines. That's a great question. Okay, so remember back in the day before FedEx and all of that stuff when we just had mail?
Oh, good.
So now remember when you wanted something sent to you by the mail, you would say, okay, I've got 10 days. And then we decided that was too long. So then we moved on to FedEx when you had next day. But that was like next afternoon, right? Then it was next 10:30, by 10:30. Then that wasn't fast enough and it became next business morning by 8 a.m., right? Paying extra for that. And now we have drones that deliver things same day. You know what that says to me? Procrastination. That's all it says to me. It says that people can wait longer and longer and longer to actually do stuff. Instead of being buttoned up ahead of time and then saying, I'm ready for the surprise you're going to throw at me because I've got it all organized. Oh, you want to throw that wrench in there? I'm covered because everything else is taken care of, right? So when your boss, if you're not the boss, but you're in charge of production, has a project, you make sure you're proactive. You go and find that script ahead of time, and you look, even before it's been written in English, you look at the Japanese back page of the line count and get a rough idea who's in the show and roughly how much time you're going to need. And you contact those actors and put them on hold ahead of time. Then you also go, all right, so if this script is not going to be ready on time, maybe the second episode that I need to get out this week will be. So maybe I need to flip them and do episode 2 and then episode 1, right? So you have to be proactive so that you are ready for, oh man, we have a big problem with it. No problem, because I got everything else done on the second show, so we have no problems. That doesn't mean it's perfect. But don't wait until the drone comes and drops that script off on your desk. Go and be proactive. It's the same thing. I had a show recently, a concert, where I notoriously show up early to things, all right? Because I wanted to make sure they had all the gear we needed, and they didn't. So they had to go to the store to go get things. So I knew to go there before the stores closed to make sure. Where I could have just shown up 15 minutes before showtime, since everything's on the contract, and just expected everything to be in place. Now, I'm pleasantly surprised when it is, but I'm never surprised when it's not. All right, one last question, then we're going to call. Yes?
All right, as a person, I do like college radio,
Mm-hmm.
and I do little like voice acting, small stuff, just like for friends, like credits for school. Now, I could do stuff on a microphone all the damn time.
Right.
But as soon as the camera's on me, I freeze up. Are you the same way, or is that just
Well, as I said earlier, I don't do on camera and I don't do stage. But when I'm playing, people take pictures of me and videotape me, and you guys are videotaping me, so that's all fine. But it's a different dynamic. if you're more of a voice actor or a radio personality, that's great. That's fine. Sometimes when you're on stage, you can hide behind some of the physicality and the pauses in your speech because you're thinking on your feet. And you can do something to kill time. Where you can't do that on the radio, or else someone will change the channel. I also think that the art form of on camera and the subtleties of facial expressions is a whole different thing. We start to become very self-conscious of that, where maybe you're not so self-conscious of the way you speak, which is great. But I don't think you need to be both to be successful. You don't have to be an on-camera personality to also just to be an actor. You can be a voice actor if that's what you prefer, or you're more comfortable with. But if you're interested, I'm not flirting with you, but you're attractive. Okay, so if you wanted to do something that was where you're showing your face, then maybe what you do is you take a theater class, and you perform in front of a group like this and do a scene, or improvise, do an improv group, just to get the presentation part done. Don't think about the cameras. Do it without the cameras at first, just to do the stuff on the stage. And then maybe ask somebody, hey, could you just film me on your iPhone? Because I want to see what I'm doing. We used to film our band's rehearsals, which was awful. We would record them and then watch them back and just go, oh, am I doing that during that song? That's just terrible. Why am I? And then that started to get planted in my brain. So now I don't want to know. Now it's just, people post videos of our shows and they go, hey, I videotaped your gig. And I'm like, I know what I did right and I know what I did wrong. I don't need to watch it. I'm glad you liked it. That's fantastic. So I don't want to start analyzing because I will start overanalyzing. But I would think if you're interested in the on-camera or the FaceTime, take a chance and join a community theater, or you're near a school, which I'm sure has stuff going on. Perform and see if you can get past that. But anybody who's a performer who tells you they don't have stage fright or they don't get nervous before a performance is lying. It's how you address that energy. I like to take a nap for like 10 minutes before I play so that I can save it up and then use it for the show. But everybody has it. And it's whether it takes over or you take it and use it. So if that's getting in your way, then try to grab it and go, this is making me uncomfortable, but you know what? I'm going to own it. I'm going to own this energy. I'm going to get up there and I'm going to try something. And especially, and I wasn't just kidding when I said the thing about the anime cons, I think what's really cool about conventions and this community feel is that we're very supportive. We're not necessarily, we're the sort of the freaks and geeks and quirky guys. I was that guy too. And here, we're all the same. You know what I mean? We're all part, and there's a lot of support here. So if you're going to do something, this is a great environment to try those things out because this group will be supportive. Nobody here is going to judge you. They're going to applaud you, right? If she got up here and did a scene, you would cheer for her because that's the way we are. So anyway, speaking of which, we're going to take a little break from me because I got to get ready for a show in here at 9 o'clock. I'm going to play a little concert here, solo acoustic stuff. If you didn't check out the rest of my resume, I'm going to drop some names because maybe it'll make you come back and tell your friends. So I toured with Ringo Starr and the All-Star Band as the solo opening act for summer. I toured with Leonard Skinner, Peter Frampton. I played with Jethro Tull in Chicago, Hall & Oates. I played with a lot of those guys. I played with for hundreds of thousands of people in big, giant arenas. And this is a great little theater. So what I'm going to ask you guys is, since you've been a great audience for me for this panel, is go tell 5 friends, each of you, to come watch my show at 9, and we'll have a nice little intimate concert in here. All right? Cool. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. What? Do it after concert. Yeah. Because I got the stuff set up and all of that.